now for my brain, it's not overwhelming to me to make meals. It's not overwhelming for me to make sure the refrigerator is organized or the pantry is organized. So my kids or my husband can go in and see what there is available. Right. It's not a mess. It's not crazy. It's all there.
Hello, truth tellers. Welcome back to the ADHD Scapegoat Podcast. I'm Angie, and today I have a special guest with me. This is Erin. She's a registered dietitian, an ADHD household expert, and my childhood friend since elementary school. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Erin.
Yes. So Angie says I'm an expert, but I feel like this is a new thing for us, right?
Kind of new.
It is a little new.
Fairly new.
My husband, probably something he struggled with his whole life.
Right.
Told he was just a boy. So it was really into adulthood that he really was realizing things were becoming harder, more difficult. So got him self-diagnosed. So it's been about a year for him.
Okay.
And then he was very adamant that our children, but I say children, but one is diagnosed officially right now, our daughter. So we really felt she was more affected. So we kind of jumped into that. So she was officially diagnosed in the fall of 2024, so last year. So this is really just kind of new for us, but it's been interesting, exciting, eye-opening.
Right.
And, you know, to kind of blend my world of nutrition, which is obviously something that's always been very important to me in general, but also diving into the research, looking into all the things nutrition-related and ADHD has been really great.
Yeah. And so when your husband was, getting the diagnosis and saying, I think our kids have it, was he seeing a lot of himself and all of a sudden, because a lot of times what happens is the kids will go in for the diagnosis, the parents, going in, something, my kid's struggling with A, B, and C, they have ADHD, and then as the doctor or the physician's going through all of the symptoms, they're going, actually, that's me.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool that he saw it first and now it's just kind of being reflected or he's seeing similar things that he went through.
And I think because, he looks back on childhood and thinks, well, geez, couldn't pay attention in school or, the thought of going to more schooling or really difficult schooling just was not of interest to him.
Right.
And kind of thinks, what could have been really. And he did not want that, specifically for our daughter right now. We're just kind of keeping an eye on our son, but definitely did not want the same for her. And, obviously, girls can present differently than men do. So that was a little bit of a struggle in itself, is really just getting her the diagnosis she needed and having a doctor listen to her.
Right.
So, it's been a challenge at times, but
it is.
I feel like we are doing what's right for our children.
Right. That's awesome. And so let's dive into this food conversation, because with ADHD, I think you can talk about all different levels of, strict diets, food habits, food tendencies, the way that, what foods benefit ADHD brings. There's all different areas, obviously, and that's how it is for everybody, right? We were talking right before we got on about how, basically everyone's diet is kind of like an experiment of what works, what doesn't. Certain people just have texture issues. Some people their stomach can't handle that, or, just all sorts of different things that you just have to try it. Yeah. You just have to experiment to see what works. So when it comes to ADHD and food, help us understand kind of how ADHD brains interact differently with food.
So like you said, when we talk about ADHD and nutrition, there's so many things we can talk about. We could talk about, hyper-fixation meals. We can talk about the overwhelming, I have to prepare a meal. I have to meal plan.
That is,
we can talk about nutrient deficiencies that we often see with ADHD. We can talk about food dyes, or like you mentioned, elimination diets. Are they needed? Are they necessary?
Right.
Do we need to cut out certain things?
Right.
There's so many avenues that we can really go with. And honestly, with nutrition in general, I work for myself. So I do nutrition counseling privately with patients, one-on-one, and really nothing is perfect, right? All of these guidelines, all of these recommendations, do they have purpose? Absolutely.
Right.
But do they fit every single person? Not necessarily.
Right.
Like that's where I, as a dietitian, have to listen to my patients, have to listen to my families, hear what works for them, what doesn't work for them.
Right.
Obviously, with somebody with an ADHD mind, I'm not going to say, well, you have to meal plan. Like, why are you not meal planning for your family? Why are you not, setting aside a few hours on a Sunday to make 3 meals or whatever that might look like?
Right. And that might work once.
Yeah.
Like you might get really excited and be like, oh, I'm totally tackling this.
Even me.
And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't want to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was really excited at the beginning, but after like 3 hours of doing it, I was like, oh, what did I just get myself into?
No,
right.
This mess.
Right.
This mess.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's just so many different ways we have to kind of look at, somebody with a neurotypical brain versus, not, and just really figure out what's going to work best for them.
Right. Yeah. And I think some of the, food behavior, like when you were talking about the hyperfixation on a food, I think that's actually something it's such a tough balance, because you will be like, oh, I really like this breakfast. Like I will go, for example, I'll be like oatmeal with little brown sugar, strawberries, and because that actually fuels me and makes me like, that's a breakfast that actually feels substantial, right?
Yeah.
And I'll do it, all week, and I'm really into it. And then because my husband does the cooking and the grocery shopping, thank goodness.
How lucky.
Yes, very lucky. And I'll be like, yes, get more strawberries, get more oatmeal, whatever. And then the next week I have it one day and I'm like, I'm done. Mm-hmm. I've done it. And then that throws everything out of whack too, because now it's like, okay, well now what do I want to do? Right. And then, switching, but you can go through little pockets of, each meal doing that. So how do you work with that?
I think in general, probably when it comes to nutrition, one of the biggest pieces of advice I give is you have to be open-minded. Right. And I think going back to what we kind of talked about before, the amount of nutrition information that we are thrown at daily, honestly, through social media, through Aunt Carol and what she did, she told you at the birthday party and over the weekend, you constantly start to question yourself and what is right? How much do I need? Do I need to do this? Is that okay for me? Should I have this? Should I not? And I think more than anything, I always tell my patients, and this is across the board, right? If I'm seeing a patient with, new diagnosis of diabetes, high cholesterol, wants to lose weight, whatever it might be, going back to the basics of nutrition that we do know works, right? Eating balanced meals, eating fruits and vegetables, eating fiber, getting enough water, eating enough protein, eating whole grains. Right. All of those things are just very basic nutrition guidelines that truly many people are not doing.
Right.
Even just
it's like start there.
Yes.
Go back to that as your starting point.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
Yes.
I like that because that feels doable just in the way you're saying that. Like we're going back to basics. These are things you've learned, and yes, not every aspect may work, but that's where we start. That's our starting jump off point. So I hope everyone hears this. It's like you're starting off with something you already know. Right. What a relief.
Right. It's what we've always been told but unfortunately, truly, I'm not seeing that. Like on most patients that I work with, are you eating 5 cups of fruits and vegetables a day?
No,
you're not. Okay. So how can we get there? What do we need to get there? If you're eating 2, are we going to say, hey, somebody with ADHD, are you going to say, hey, you got to get to 5? Well, no, you're at 2. Let's try to get to 3. Can we add 3?
Right.
So just these small attainable goals, doing the basics that we've kind of, what I like, that's one thing that I always say. Most people know what they're supposed to do. Some people don't. Some people truly are just, it is very confusing.
Right.
But most people do know what they need to do to improve their diet.
But they're like out of the habit of doing it. Just out of the, that makes me think of drinking water. I mean, that's probably a huge problem. I know, go for it. Like that's a huge component to where people, when you're not drinking enough water, you'll be like, I'm super hungry. Yes. And you just need a drink of water, right? Yeah. It's, so, that we are constantly telling our kids, did you get a drink of water? Mm-hmm. You need to drink more water today. Like if they come home and their water bottles are full still from school, I'm like, did you refill this at school? Yeah. Or is this, it was full when it went to school. I filled it. Yeah. Have you touched it all day? And I know when we were kids, it was like drinking fountain. You didn't have water bottles. Yeah. And drinking fountains. So, okay, you're with me. Yeah. So gross. But now at school, they have like at the back of the drinking fountain, it's like the water bottle fillers. It's awesome. Yep. But it's how often are they, able to access their water bottles or their water bottles at their things like that. But like throughout the day, I'm constantly like, okay, how many times have I filled my water bottle? Yes. Am I drinking enough? When you drink your water first thing in the morning and it feels like, oh my God, this is the best thing. How dehydrated was I? Right?
Absolutely.
Adding water, making sure people are drinking enough water is probably a huge component.
It's a super important, just like you said, for most people in general, right? Everybody. But the ADHD brain, our brains are very water filled. So we need to make sure that water is in our body and we are not dehydrated.
Right. So. And the ADHD brain is nonstop. So fuel it. Mm-hmm. You need to fuel it with water.
Yes.
I love that. Okay. So can we talk about kind of a controversial topic?
Okay. Ready?
It's controversial just because I think there's just not enough studies around, food dyes.
Yep.
And I know it comes up, especially when someone is neurodiverse. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So we definitely know food dyes did not cause an increase in ADHD.
Exactly.
There's nothing that is causing ADHD. Right. It's not our food dyes. It's not our food system. It's nothing in our foods. You could say chemicals they spray on our food. You could say the ingredients in our food. It's none of that. As far as the research shows, there really is no definitive research that shows that a food dye is, for most people, causing an increase in symptoms. So increase in, inattention or hyperactivity. So we're not seeing that. Does that mean it doesn't exist? No. There is research that does show a small subset of children specifically could have an increase in symptoms. So what does that mean for most? That means you've got to trial that with your family. I don't necessarily see that in my daughter right now. But honestly, this is still kind of new for us. So we're still working through a lot of different things. We're like working through medications. We're working through diet. We're working through, her meal patterns, all of those types of things. Right. But for somebody that has maybe a seasoned parent that has children that are ADHDers or them themselves are, you have to trial it. And it's more so what we're seeing specifically the azo dyes, which is yellow 5 and red dye 40. Okay. So it's specifically those two, not red dye 3. That is not the one. So it's specifically those two. So it's just trying to eliminate those things. But the tricky part is you want to try to keep everything else constant, right? You want to keep sleep levels the same as much as you can, right? Get the same amount of sleep. You want to try to make sure that you're still eating in the same patterns. You're keeping the hydration levels up. Summer's coming. I'm always thinking about our routines for the summer right now.
Oh yeah.
Keeping routines as much as you can.
Right.
And see if you see a difference. If certainly you see that difference, is that beneficial for your child? 100%. I will never deny that. Just because research shows something, if you anecdotally or you feel within your family, it's benefiting your child, you as a person, absolutely do it.
Yeah. So what are some foods that those dyes are in, or where do they kind of show up? If parents are like, I want to test this out.
Mm-hmm. So that's the tricky part.
Okay.
Is when you see them, they're in a lot of our foods that are a little bit more what in my house that we call like a fun food or a food that we're not having all the time.
Absolutely.
Right? So something like candies, gummies, some of your drinks. Sometimes they're added to cereals, things like that. So when you're pulling away these foods, now you're having less nutrient, voided foods, and most likely trying to add in some more nutritious foods. So sometimes it's hard to kind of determine where are you seeing the benefit from.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of trial and error, essentially.
Yeah.
But those are kinds of the foods you will see it in.
Yeah, and I know with our older son, Wyatt, he there was this period of time, I want to say it was around first grade-ish, and he always wanted a red popsicle. And after he had a red popsicle, we were like, who is this child? What happened? And we couldn't, we were like, whoa. Yeah. And then just paying attention, he always picked the red one. Of course, the cherry is probably the nice, well, I mean, red it's a good Skittles. Flavor. Yeah. He would always go for that. Yeah. So he would go for the red candy. He would go for the Swedish fish, or he would pick the red sucker. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And then that's how we picked up the pattern so quickly, is because he would always go for the red thing. Yeah. And he liked the flavor. Yeah. But then we noticed, and we were like, oh no, we're going to pull back on the red popsicle. And he would have a purple one, and I'm not kidding. It was it was a completely different thing. And so we would just we'd send him to, my husband's parents and be like, just no red popsicles. Yeah. Just no red suckers. Just stay away from the red candies. And sure enough, it was fine. But it was, now he can have them and he's fine. Yeah. So it was just a period of time when his body and his brain were like, no. Yeah. Don't have this. So yeah, it was something that we paid attention to, because we weren't really sure at the time what was causing it. And then,
Yeah, sensitivities certainly do exist. We are not denying that at all. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. So, but across the board, right? Do I think that it needs to be a no, you should not have this? I don't.
And you're right. I mean, you bring up everything else has to be consistent. So when they're not getting enough sleep, and we've talked about this in other podcasts as well, when you're not getting enough sleep, it's affected. So the efficacy of your medicine decreases when you haven't gotten enough sleep. So I was saying to you earlier, you add in protein, we need more protein today. Make sure you guys are drinking your water today, because, you got 2 less hours of sleep than you normally get. Yep. And we talked to them about being patient with themselves and taking deep breaths and all those things. So we try to set them up for success when we see that their sleep wasn't great. And, I think there's also the added factor of holidays, when there's a bunch of sweet treats, especially Christmas time. Yep. Halloween, basically from Halloween until Valentine's Day, there's a lot of sugar. Yes. And a lot of sweet things brought in. But if there's a birthday, they want donuts for breakfast. They want to take cupcakes to school, and then they want cake at night. Do you know what I'm saying? Yes. Just that in one day just throws everything out of whack. And it's fine. These are special occasions, right? But it's also something you want to pay attention to. You don't want to go to that special occasion and be like, yeah, give my kid all the red popsicles. Right. And then you're around all these family members and the kid's melting down. And it's not that you want to take away these fun, special things. You just want to set your kid up for success. Right. And think about it. If you haven't gotten enough sleep as an adult and all you eat is sugar all day, how are you going to behave? Exactly. Don't do that. Set your kid up for success. Right.
And I think it's around, those are conversations that you as parents need to have with your kids, obviously, because, and honestly, these conversations should be happening anyway, going into parties, going into, where there is an abundance of foods that maybe they are not used to eating as often. So these conversations have to happen, and they just have to be in a way, I think I remember you did a podcast when you talked about the negative talk that ADHDers get. Mind-blowing, honestly.
20,000
sad to think about.
Right.
Like when I think about like, you know, my sweet daughter, or even like not my little husband, but my husband when he was little,
Right.
like just, you know, to think about those things.
Right.
And just to then throw something, oh, well, you can't have that because you're going to act like a fool or you're going to embarrass
Right.
me. And so the conversation around foods always need to be positive, period.
Right.
Doesn't matter who I'm talking to.
We're supporting your body and your brain.
Yes.
This is
Yes.
fuel for your brain.
Yes.
We don't want to set you up like you could say, hey, I let you have that extra cookie. I didn't set you up for success.
Yeah. Yep.
And you're struggling right now.
Yeah.
Let's
on me.
That's
Yep.
my fault.
Yep.
We're going to do better next time.
Yep.
You know? And you're right, having the conversation ahead of time. Hey, Grandma's going to have scotcheroos there this week. Oh my God, they're so good. Have you had them before? Oh my. Okay, so they're Rice Krispie treats with like a chocolate butterscotch chip
Okay.
covering on top.
Yeah.
They're heaven.
Yeah.
But the very, very small quantities because there's so much sugar in them.
Yeah.
But you say there's going to be scotcheroos there today. If that's the treat that you're going to have, we're going to have one and we're not having all of the other things. So you're not going to have some cookies. You're not going to have some donuts. You're not going to have this. You have to make a choice. You have
Right.
to choose between them.
Right.
Because all of that is not okay.
Right.
And we have that conversation with our kids so often that now they'll ask, hey, if I'm having this right now, am I going to be allowed to have this later? Mm-hmm. And they'll make the choice that they want to make in that moment. So I love that you said that because it doesn't have to be a restrictive, negative.
Yes.
You're not allowed to do this because you're a problem. Mm-hmm. It's more about how are we going to work as a team
Right.
to have the most fun at this family gathering with supporting our brains and our bodies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love that. So let's talk about medication and the appetite challenges that come with medication because, I mean, me and Jeremy have talked about it before, how it's totally natural for kids with ADHD to have a little bit of appetite suppression, especially when they first start a stimulant medication, but it usually wears off. It's just the way the ADHD brain works throughout the day and hyper focuses naturally and just gets busy and forgets things, but they'll eat a lot for breakfast or eat a good breakfast. And then it's fairly common for kids with ADHD to just like not even want lunch or just like pick at lunch because they're just like, this is the time when my brain's working. I'm going to take advantage of it. And they want to do all the things. And then as they get through the day and their day's winding down, they'll eat dinner and probably want a snack after dinner because now they've done all they want to do for the day and they can actually focus on eating. So it is something that kind of naturally happens. But like, how do we support these appetite challenges so they're not just like, you know, just struggling all day?
Yeah. This is probably the hardest piece that we've run into, I would say. Not so much my husband, but specifically our daughter. And I think a lot of it going into it is, at least what I'm noticing, my daughter was never a big eater ever. You know, she just wasn't that kid that would eat and just want to keep eating, or would eat and then an hour later was like, I'm ready for dinner. So she was never a big eater. And now, you know, with a medication that can cause a suppression, she certainly is. It's even a little bit more challenging to kind of want her to be interested in any kind of food.
Was she kind of a grazer? Like would just eat a little bit here, a little bit there?
The funny thing is I have seen her put down some food for sure. Like really put down food. It's just
especially because she's an athlete. So yeah.
And well, and that's the other thing to think about too. Like especially when we're talking, you know, children. You know, if you have children that are athletes, like that's another level because we obviously need to make sure that they're fueled enough. Right. Because otherwise they can be underfueling for performance or, you know, performance is affected, injuries, all of those things can occur.
Right.
But going back to your question, kind of what to do, I think, like you said, breakfast, ideally, obviously, get a really solid breakfast in before the medication is even started. So really try to prioritize those calories then. Mm-hmm. So whether you're the tricky part is obviously it's breakfast. It's before school, and breakfast is tough anyway because people got to get out the door. They're, their kids are eating in the car or whatever whatever the situation might be. But breakfast, just trying to make that as most calorically dense as possible. So the one thing that drives me crazy, I think, as a dietitian, as a parent, so my kids are in middle school. They, all through elementary school, have a snack time, right? You get a snack.
Oh, yeah.
Where does it go? They take it away. They take it away in middle school. I mean, my daughter has even said there are, you can't eat walking through the hall. Some classes you cannot have food in, things like that. Mm-hmm. You take kids who are now going through puberty, growing growth spurts, huge appetites.
Yep.
My daughter eats breakfast at 7:15 at home. Her lunch is at 12:45. So now you have this huge gap.
Yep.
And not that she's asking to eat by any means, but, these kids, when calorie needs are heightened in this, crazy growth. So that drives me crazy. But that's besides the point. That is something that I have considered, maybe even if your child has a 504 plan, allowing them to have something to eat in a class that would allow that.
Yeah.
Because it, especially if it's towards the end of that medication, or maybe, if they take another dose at school, have that snack. We've talked about that. Have the snack as she's walking down to the nurse to take her second dose. Yeah. Something like that they can do, or within the class.
I love that.
So really trying to prioritize that for sure.
Just because that's a huge chunk of time.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge.
It really is.
And going back to what you said about, lunch especially, my daughter is the typical female ADHDer where she is chatty. She wants to talk. She wants to input. She wants to interrupt you. She wants to tell you what she's got to tell you. And so lunchtime is that time, right? Yeah. You're sitting with your friends. You're relaxing. You're talking.
You're finally able to talk.
So
right.
Food is not the priority there.
It's if I get a chance to take a bite, I will.
In my 20-minute lunch period, right? Or who knows how short it is by the time she gets down there. So, that's why going back to breakfast, it's just such, it's the most important meal of the day, but really for an ADHD brain, breakfast really is super important.
It matters.
Really, really is. Then, just trying to snack, trying to, again, focus on those quick, easy things, high calorie things. So things like nuts, seeds, trail mix, cheese, peanut butter, things that are really quick, but just a small amount gives you a pretty solid amount of calories, depending on how much you have. We do a lot of protein shakes, protein bars that are calorie dense, that are easy. Sometimes she doesn't want to sit down. Let's say it's after school, comes home from school. She doesn't want to sit down and sit and eat. But something she could drink, a smoothie, a protein shake, something like that, that she could, get on board with. Even if she wants to do homework, she can sip and do that too.
Right. Yeah, our little one, we always are reminding him at lunch, because he'll say, I only ate 3 bites of this. And we're like, what were you doing? He's like, well, and he'll tell us he's having this big conversation. And we're like, okay, so remember, you take a bite, chew your bite, and then you can talk. Yeah. And then when someone else is talking, then you take another bite, and you just take turns. That's how everybody gets the conversation in. Yeah. And he's like, oh yeah, I'll do that. And so he'll say, I finished my whole sandwich today because I remembered to take bites. Yeah. And so whatever your kid is just asking those questions about how'd lunch go today? Yeah. What worked for you today? Yeah. What didn't? Yeah. Sometimes they'll say, oh, there was no syrup. Yeah. She didn't offer me syrup. The lunch lady didn't offer me syrup, so I couldn't eat my waffle. And I was like, you could eat your waffle. Yeah. But there's little things like that. There are. So just having that conversation and making the kid aware, a lot of times when Wyatt was first struggling, when he was first on medication, we just said, I know you're not hungry and you don't have to eat a lot. Because, a lot of ADHD experts talk about the fact that when there's an aversion to eating and the kid is like, no, I'm full. Their brain is literally telling them almost they feel like they've had a 5-course meal and you're forcing them to pick a dessert. Yeah. When really you're just saying you have to eat lunch. Yeah. Yeah. But that's their brain is telling them they're full. Whether it's, partially due to the medication suppressing it, or they're hyper focused on something else, they're not listening to their body in those hyper focused moments about hunger, thirst, any of that. So you telling them they have to eat, that's where you kind of get into this argument or this push and pull as the parent, because you're trying to force a kid to eat who feels like they've eaten everything in sight when they haven't.
And I think that's a good point to bring up too, that's where you really can try to prioritize those meals or snacks that are away from, ideally maybe the medication has started to wear off, or maybe dinner can just be a bigger meal. Breakfast was a bigger meal. You are putting a snack. There's nothing wrong with snacks. I always tell people, a calorie need of a child and adult, it's like money in the bank. You have the day to use that up however you want to spend it, right? So that might mean breakfast and dinner are really high calorie meals for them, and lunch is a little bit smaller. And like you said, I think because there's so much pressure around food, period, that you don't want it to be a battle. Especially as a parent and a child, you just don't want that battle. You don't want that negative association with food. And that's a balance, especially I find with a female athlete, that I really have to be careful with my verbiage around food and eating and fueling for performance and all those things, because I certainly don't want it to go an opposite way. Right.
And you don't want to be like, no, you can't eat a snack after dinner because then you're going to get fat, or say like any of those things. Like, you actually have to look at, try to work on any food issues you personally have as the parent, or any negative food messaging you received as a kid that maybe your kid is seeing you do. So that's when these things kind of come up for them. And treat yourself when it comes to food how you would talk to your kid. Because if you see your kid coming up with these, I look fat in this, or I look like I'm not eating that because then I'm going to, not like the way I look or something. And you're like, whoa, where are they getting that? And it could be from friends. It might not be from you. But if you step back and go, oh my gosh, I do that. Or something, that's part of this too. Like, they're learning by your example, which, again, maybe the parents have to do a little bit more work on the back end, but it'll benefit all of you.
It's, we didn't even really think about that part of it, but you bringing that up, absolutely. That, obviously, like we talked about, the amount of misinformation around nutrition is out of control. It really is. It's terrifying, to be honest with you. And that, honestly, like, as a new parent, I even, like, probably my mother-in-law could remember, when Kenzie had her first birthday. I was like, oh, make her cake out of whole wheat flour and banana and pumpkin and eggs, and that's it. Like, don't put sugar in there. Like, I was that parent. I was buying all the most nutritious, organic, least ingredient food items, and quickly realized, just from my work with disordered eating, how quickly that could turn into a way I did not want. And I truly, like, disordered eating is such a hard space to work in that it really opened my eyes to thinking, fed is best for my children. I need to feed my kids. I need to set them up for success, understand nutrition. And especially when you throw something in like ADHD, especially with an athlete, I just need to make sure she's eating enough to fuel the high, crazy amount of activity that she does. So you're absolutely right. And that's probably, almost step one for probably a lot of families is take a look at yourself. Take a look at some of the things that you were told. Honestly, still even we are told that this is bad, this is good. This is unhealthy, this is healthy. I don't even use those words in my house. I don't use them in my house because we aren't good because we ate a salad, and we're not bad because we had Burger King. That doesn't exist. It's the balance of everything. So it's a really, really important point that probably most people need to just kind of take a step back and look at.
Well, and there's a high, correlation. There's any coexisting condition. ADHD is rarely a standalone diagnosis. Whether it's depression, anxiety, learning disabilities, but eating disorders come in to
very high.
The anxiety portion, OCD. I went through an eating disorder my freshman year of college because it was something I could control. It felt like I was getting my control back.
Yeah.
My OCD was formed as a way of feeling like I was gaining control, even though I wasn't.
Yep.
In that moment, it's serving that purpose. And, I suffered from bulimia. I don't even know if you know this, but we might have talked about it. Yep. And so my freshman year of college, and I stopped it. Just was like, all of a sudden one day I was like, this is so gross. What am I doing to myself? And just stopped it.
Which is incredible.
It was so nuts. But also, I understood where it came from. I understood why I chose to go down that path and was like, this is what I need to do to control this, because I didn't have control. I didn't have a diagnosis.
Yep.
Eating disorders are super common with people with ADHD. So, I think a lot of times when parents are worried about, we could talk about the medication forever, just because of all that's involved with it. But when parents see that a stimulant will suppress their appetite, or even some doctors that don't feel super comfortable diagnosing or going through a medication trial, which we experienced a bunch of, the second they see any sort of temporary weight loss, or, they're not growing to a certain standard during this initial 3 months or 6 months on the medication, we're stopping the medication, or we're pulling back, or, oh my gosh, a parent will panic. My kid didn't eat all day. I'm not giving him this medication, because they so fear an eating disorder or a malnourished kid, or, all these other outside things, and understanding that, yes, medication trials take time, and there could be a tiny bit of weight loss, but if you actually look at the studies and you play around with it, there are appetite challenges around this medication, but it's also the balance,
right?
And paying attention and seeing what works, the trial and error. It can be taxing, but if you look at it as like, we're going to find the best solution together. Us, our medical team, our dietitian, the teachers, we're all going to figure this out together.
Right.
You can get to a place where your kid sees the benefit when they eat a high protein breakfast.
Right.
Or they see the benefit when they have that snack that they're allowed to have at 3:00, right? Like, they start to notice, hey, this really helps my brain. I want to do that.
Yep. And going back to what you were saying too about, obviously the incidence of disordered eating being so much higher with ADHDers, going back to what we were talking about before with like the elimination diets or things like that, that can really, fuel that more. So that's another reason why I never, number one, it's not backed by science, but number two, like, it's very hard to keep up with an elimination diet, especially with children. I've followed elimination diets in the past just for GI issues. They're awful. They're very difficult. And I'm an adult.
And you have to be really consistent with a lot of these diets. And that's part of what is such a natural struggle for ADHDers, is that consistency. We need the novelty. We like the safe routine, but a rigid structure that we can't veer off of at all feels it's impossible.
And then if you do, then where does that go?
Then you're a failure.
Yes.
And then you binge on the opposite side.
Yes.
And none of that is serving you.
Right. Exactly.
This is so good. I mean, I love how you talked about the eating windows, though, finding them. Yep. Because those are the things, like, sometimes my kids have 3 breakfasts.
Sure.
Sometimes they have, a snack after school, dinner, snack at night. It just depends.
Yep.
But we kind of let us know, because it helps them listen to their body. Right?
Yes. Well, and that's the other thing. We as adults, children, we're not robots. Not every day is going to feel the same. Right?
Nope.
We're not gonna, my hunger levels change.
Right.
Right? So how are we taking that away from a child to be able to explore that, to talk about that. Obviously, as parents, we can guide them and help them and know timing of medications and things like that, and obviously make meals as calorically dense if we need to.
Right.
But we also have to allow them to understand what their body needs to.
Right. And communicate that. Yeah. Because I think that's a huge part of, me coming from this authoritarian household of my way or the highway, and not being able to make those choices, or not even knowing what I liked and didn't like in a lot of situations, just what was expected. It was harder for me to actually listen to what my body needed.
Sure.
Like, it almost felt like if my body was suffering, I was doing it right.
Right.
And
you could say that honestly for there's so many adults, non-HD, ADHDers, that have no idea what hunger feels like.
Right.
They eat what's on their plate. They finish what's on their plate. They finish what their kids didn't finish, right? That happens so often. So obviously,
this is the time to eat. We eat at 5 o'clock.
Yes. You finish your plate.
And you finish your plate.
And you're going to sit there until you do.
Oh, Lord.
Horrible.
I can't.
Horrible.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah.
It's horrible. And honestly, it's the same thing. We could obviously go into like picky eating and things like that. But, we're just not giving children the opportunity to feel fullness, to make choices on their food, right? You don't eat food you don't like. Why are we ever thinking that children should eat something that they don't like? A zucchini or a red pepper is very normal to us, right? To a child's brain, to an ADHD brain, like that is a new food, a scary food, and we're forcing often.
And there were times where I would be like, I had like a lot of issues with like texture things. And I would be like, no, I can't eat that. It's too smushy. Like I would say that it's too smushy. I love crunchy, but I was like, oh, it's too smushy. I can't. And it would be like, oh, get over it.
Yeah.
Like, eat it.
Yeah.
It's the vegetable. And I would be like, it was cauliflower. I'm just saying it was too smushy. And the texture just would throw me.
Yeah.
Broccoli was a little crunchier. I could handle broccoli. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it really is though.
It was weird, but it was like, it was made to be like I was making an excuse to not eat my vegetable, when I really had like I felt like I was gonna vomit.
Yeah.
And just listen to the kids. They're like, let them try new things.
Right.
Like offer it up, especially if you're having it. But that's what we do. Like we try to offer it up and then see.
Yeah.
And there's gonna be a vegetable they like. There's gonna be a fruit they like. Just got to find it and go with it.
Yep.
And if they like a variety of them, mix them in from time to time still, because I think that gives that novelty to the ADHD brain too.
Yeah. Also allowing them to have an input into it too. Like, hey, you know what? I'm kind of thinking about dinner. Dad's going grocery shopping. What kind of vegetables do you want to eat this week? Let them have an input into it and a little bit of a buy-in. And then it's broccoli. Hey, that was the one I wanted.
Yep, that's what I picked.
So it just gives them
my husband Jeremy does that. He always asks them, what are you guys thinking you want to eat this week? And he'll talk to them about it. Yeah. And they're pretty good about doing that.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive into, this is my biggest, this is why I married my husband. No, it's not why I married him. I'm joking. But this is the perk I have because my husband loves to cook.
Okay.
He finds it as a stress reliever.
Yeah.
I find it stressful. Just the idea of prepping and planning, like you talked about, like it is so overwhelming to me.
Yep.
So this is not just from my personal experience. I know that there's a lot of people with ADHD who struggle with it. And especially like with this stereotype that moms are the homemakers. They cook all the meals. They're the ones who are packing the school lunches. They're doing all of that. You feel like, I don't know how to do that. It actually stresses me out. I don't enjoy it. It doesn't mean I don't love my kids. But you kind of feel this, I'm a failure because I don't do this. Yeah. And I struggled with that for a very long time until me and Jeremy like started having conversations about like our household duties in a sense of like, hey, what do you enjoy doing?
Right.
And what do I enjoy doing? And if those are opposite. Let's swap.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, and figure this out. So from decision paralysis, which is a huge part of it. Also, what can I actually make? What recipes can I actually follow? I feel like there's too many moving parts a lot of the time. Yeah. I get so distracted by thoughts or things that come up that I forget to set a timer, or do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to that, especially if it's not something that you do very often. So how do we work with the meal prep when it comes to the ADHD brain?
So I will say this. I do not have ADHD. I am neurotypical brain here. I hate making dinner. I hate making those choices. I think in general, going back to what we said just about the amount of information out there,
right.
I also think there's, like you said, there's some of those stereotypes. There's also those, meal prepping accounts or like Pinterest where you see these beautifully curated chalkboards.
This takes 15 minutes. Yes. And I'm like, no, it doesn't.
Yes, with all these ingredients that I don't own.
Right.
And I'm not sure where you even find that.
I have to look that up.
Yes.
Yeah.
So honestly, to even start there, like I have always been a very simple dietitian. I have always been a very simple cooker, meal planner, prepper, all of those things. If I ever did recipe development, which I have done in the past, I've done cooking demonstrations, all those things. My meals were always very simple, easy, not a bunch of ingredients you don't own. So, number one, I think that we need to normalize convenience foods.
Okay.
So, this is in general. I think there is a lot of stereotypes against, let's say, frozen foods or boxed meals or canned vegetables. And obviously, I'm a dietitian, and so probably people are like, oh my gosh, who is this girl? Like, you're saying that you should use these, prepared meals or boxed meals or whatever.
You're not saying use just only ingredients from the farmer's market.
Yes.
Yep. Right.
Yes.
Right.
We don't have to go out and, make our own sourdough bread, and we don't have to do those things.
Right.
Is it great to have like beautifully homemade meals all the time? Absolutely, if that works for your family.
Right.
And there might be days that does work, and there might be days that that's not going to work. I know for us, like we've talked about, I have 2 athletes that have crazy schedules that we're,
that aren't the same.
No, we're trying to eat. Truthfully, don't eat meals together many times.
Right.
And again, I think that had to be normalized for me. That was, I grew up, I was an athlete, but I grew up sitting down and having dinner with my family. Right. I did.
It's just the season of life you're in right now.
Yes.
Right.
And it's different. So I think, number one, I love that you mentioned that you and Jeremy have talked about like what works for you. I know for my brain, it's not overwhelming to me to make meals. It's not overwhelming for me to make sure the refrigerator is organized or the pantry is organized. So my kids or my husband can go in and see what there is available.
Right.
It's not a mess. It's not crazy.
It's
all there. So I think really working within your household to figure out who's doing what, who's in charge of what. And obviously my husband does a whole bunch of other things that I would never do or could do, honestly.
Right.
So I enjoy doing this part, and obviously it's very related to nutrition as well. So I think a lot of us just have to get out of our own heads that we can't use some convenience items. We can't buy some vegetables that are pre-chopped. We can't use frozen vegetables because they're frozen and they're not fresh, like you said, from the farmer's market.
Right.
So I think that is probably step one.
It's so rigid to think like that. Yeah.
Yes. And like you said, like, most people don't have the time or the capacity. Honestly, like on a Sunday with my neurotypical brain, do I want to sit and spend 3 hours prepping meals for the week? I don't.
Right.
That's not what I want to do. I want to be with my family. I want to relax. I want to go to my kids. Like, sometimes we're at sporting events, whatever. So I think just getting rid of that idea is important. I think starting small, maybe starting with, you mentioned Jeremy doing the cooking, but if somebody has a family that the ADHD brain is doing the cooking, why are we don't do 3 new recipes during the week?
Right.
Try one.
Right.
Try one. Try a very simple one. If it has more than 7 ingredients, pass on by.
Right.
Go find something different to do.
Yeah, I've even had because Jeremy loves cooking and he goes through like these pockets of wanting to try new recipes, or he'll see something, and if he tries to do it on a night where our older one would have play practice after school, and then both boys needed to shower or take a bath, and, you know, something else was going on, right? And he's trying to make this brand new meal for the first time, and he would be super overwhelmed,
right.
and then he would do something where he just felt frustrated because I said, hey, tonight's not the night for that. The night when it's kind of open and just our normal routine, and you have that cushion to throw something in. Like, I think part of it is like being real with yourself,
right,
and being realistic. Not, I mean, I always say this as the ADHD scapegoat, that I'm always negative because I'm just saying that's not going to work. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to be realistic. I don't want to set myself up and go, oh, I have enough time for this, or, you know. If you have energy on a Sunday to prep and do all that stuff one Sunday, do it. But don't hold yourself to do that every Sunday, and don't expect everything to be perfect. Just, I try to follow my energy, or my, you know, when I get excited about something or I want to try something, I try to follow that. Yeah. But I don't put too much pressure on it. I don't know why the meal prep feels like such a heavy thing with ADHD. Like,
I think, obviously, I don't have ADHD, but I find that it can be overwhelming. I think even as a parent, like, honestly, sometimes I make things and nobody likes it. So then it's like, oh, I just spent all that time doing that. You know, again, that's on just in my brain. That's a disappointment. Right. The time that you spend, the money you spend to do it.
True.
So I think there's a
level of pressure to feed your family.
There is.
Yeah.
On ourselves, that we put on ourselves just from, you know, systematic pressure, I guess. Whether they like it, they don't like it, they eat it. Obviously, then if you add, you know, obviously I want my daughter to enjoy the food because I want her to make sure she's getting enough calories or whatever that might be. I think going back to another thing, you know, making things just very simple, finding convenience items, those sort of things. Going back to what you said, if it is a day that you are feeling energetic, you're feeling good, you want a meal plan, then make more. Make extra. Not to necessarily have to eat the rest of the week. I usually tell people, don't do that. Yeah. I don't want to eat the same thing. There are many people that do. Freeze it. Utilize your freezer. Right. So now you have, hey, I made this pasta dish, and I just put 2 more meals that I can pull out and easily have another meal, and just throw a frozen veggie next to it, and dinner. That is dinner. Yeah. So just some of that, thinking ahead a little bit more on those days that you are feeling good. Extra. Yeah. Make extra.
Yeah, use those pockets of energy. And I like how you said that the way you have things organized and set up works for the whole family. So they know where to get these snacks. They know where things are available to them, especially being that they're the ones who have the ADHD and they will struggle. Or, you know, a lot of times if stuff is like hidden behind something in the fridge, or, you know, maybe not labeled on the pantry area or something like that, where, oh, I didn't even know that was there. Like, you do the grocery shopping and you just put everything away. Like, I'll say to my husband, I'll be like, hey, did you eat those grapes? What grapes? Yeah. I didn't even see them. Yeah. Oh, man, I forgot to tell you. You know what I mean? And then it's like, okay, now we need to throw them out because we never even got to them, but I love grapes. Right. So, you know what I mean? So communicating that, making sure everybody knows, hey, I got some of these, just to it cues them on to, oh yeah, I remember that mom told me that was in there. I'm hungry right now. Here's where I go.
I think the other thing too that we haven't really talked about a ton, going back to kind of, you know, what the ADHD brain needs, and going back to just our role as parents. So I saw this quote that was like gut-wrenching, that as parents we're essentially raising our children to live without us. So I think that going back to kind of, we've talked about this, right? We talked about how we have to be open with our kids and talk about food and why we're eating certain things and things like that. But going back to getting our kids involved with their choices, I think is huge and important. Yeah. But they have to know to get? What should they be eating? I think for anybody, the best type of snack is going to be some sort of, it can be a carbohydrate, but it always should have protein. Protein is so important for the ADHD brain because it's the essentially building blocks for dopamine. So we need it for neurotransmitters, or they need it for neurotransmitters. So kind of teaching them those things, like making your pantry accessible so they kind of know, oh, this is a good snack for me, or this is a good one, or going into the refrigerator, what are some good options for me to kind of pair up or grab? And that's, that's good advice for any parent, but definitely when you are seeing a benefit to nutrition for, specific reason.
I remember reading something, it was probably after my diagnosis, but, and I'm not sure how true this is, but if you're craving chocolate, you probably need red meat or protein or something like that. Is there an actual correlation with that? Because I would be like, I know ADHDers, like, for whatever reason, we tend to go more towards craving the sweet, like instant gratification type of things.
Yes.
But if it's like, oh, I'm really craving chocolate, maybe I'm lacking on protein or something. But I don't know how true that is, or if it, okay.
So I think going back to what you were saying, like usually, that snacky, crunchy, carby type food is usually what the ADHD brain wants.
Yeah.
So the pretzels, this motion of snacking.
Crackers, my kids are crackers all the time.
Yeah. So having those things and textures are important because those lead to satisfaction, right? If those are the things that your kids like, giving them, let's say, I'll say like trail mix, for example, that might not satisfy them. So then they are still hungry. They are still looking for more. They want other things. But there is some research to show that if you are craving something salty or something like sweet, there can and maybe is a nutrient deficiency. As a dietitian, I can kind of look at what a patient is eating and kind of see if I can identify any nutrient deficiencies, but definitely pediatricians, doctors can definitely do some blood work to see if you are, because in how I feel is there's no reason to supplement if you have a balanced diet, right? Food is always going to be the best option for vitamins, minerals, all those types of things over a supplement, but you can't really know that unless, number one, you meet with a dietitian and kind of have your food intake reviewed or have some blood work done.
Right. Yeah, I think it's funny how, when we were talking about habits and getting into the habit and kind of just sharing this information with your kids, as well as just understanding it yourself in order to be able to have these conversations with your kid. Because when you're setting them up to listen to their body, this is part of it.
Right.
Like, what snacks do I go to? What am I allowed to have? Like, to the point where, citric acid comes in, and there was a long time where I first learned about citric acid. I wasn't told from my original doctor that diagnosed me. All she said was, don't take your medication with, a glass of grapefruit juice or orange juice. So I didn't do that, but didn't say like citric acid. Basically, the medication is immediately excreted from your body, and it's no longer in there. So you take the medication, you drink it with the juice, and it's gone.
Yeah.
You had zero chance of allowing it to work or help your brain. And so I remember hearing that on an Attitude podcast, like probably right after our oldest was diagnosed. And I was like, excuse me? Oh my gosh. Like, so then I was, okay, what is citric acid? It's in so much stuff.
Right.
It's in fruits. It's in vegetables. It's in, like, you have to like really pay attention. So for a long time, I was just like, no fruits within an hour before or after when you take your medication. So you actually let it go and be absorbed into your system.
Right.
And so my kids would even pay attention at school, like, oh, we're having a party or something. I'm not going to have these fruit snacks because it's 2:30. The party's 2:30, and I have to take my medication at 3. like, no joke, they would come home with like 2 Swedish fish in a bag because they didn't want it to interact with their medication. And, you know, further studies have been done since then, and it's literally like taking an entire citric drink with your medication,
right.
you know, an hour before and after. And if you're adding in other supplements that would conflict with it. But it is this thing of like, not many other medications conflict with stimulants. So you can pretty much, for the most part, you know, take any other medication along with a stimulant, and there's not any interaction. So to find out, like, you had to be careful of the food, and of course that's a healthy food that they can be eating. Like, we've just been really cautious, and since then we've pulled back a lot on, you know, the full restriction. But it's like, no, you can't have soda. I mean, my older one's the only one who even wants to drink soda, but like a little bit here or there.
Right.
You can't have that within an hour before or after. And if we get soda and I'm taking my medication, I can't drink it either. Like, I won't do it.
Sure.
But I think it's just kind of, like you said, it's the balance.
Yeah.
It's understanding what works. And if you don't understand, seeking that information out, seeking that understanding, seeking a dietitian who can actually help you with this. Because, I mean, a lot of this stuff can feel really overwhelming, and that's why we're talking about it.
Yeah.
But we're also resources. Like,
I think, like you said, what I find most, especially in the field of nutrition, is especially somebody that has a condition that they want to help, like, especially their child, right? You would go to the ends of the earth for your kid, and you start to dive into it, and it can feel like, oh my gosh, they can't have this, I shouldn't give them this, I can't give them this, or, you know, they should be following this kind of diet, they can't go to the party, and all these things. And it can become so overwhelming that and on top of, if you yourself as a parent have ADHD, like, it almost feels impossible. And I think that's why, going back to what I said about just really starting with the basics, really try to focus on, you know, we find that the ADHD brain benefits so much from fruits and vegetables because of all those vitamins and minerals that are the precursors for these neurotransmitters. Getting enough protein, that is
huge.
Probably one of the biggest pieces of advice is making sure that you're getting enough protein at your child's meals and snacks. If you need to supplement, there are plenty of different options out there for that. Omega-3s are another one. We think about our brain is mostly fat, so we want to nourish it with fat. So healthy fats like nuts and seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds. If they like, or if you yourself have ADHD, cold water fish, so salmon, mackerel, tuna, those types of things, really trying to increase those. So there are these things that we can just think about instead of taking away from our kids or ourselves, like, what can we add in? What can we add to their diet or to their plate that just is adding and helpful for, honestly, many, many things, not just ADHD.
Yeah. Instead of looking at it like, oh gosh, none of this works, I've been doing it wrong. Be like, what works? Like, we talk about that a lot on this podcast, where we're, you know, I don't care what works for other people's families.
Right.
In the sense of, we're in our house, we're figuring this out. We don't have to look like everybody else. We don't have to be in, you know, an Instagram, you know, portrait.
Yep.
We're living in the reality of our life and what works for our family. It might not work for other people, and that's fine. They need to do what works for them.
Sure.
And it's the same thing, you know, when you're talking to kids, you know, bringing this up. Yeah, maybe your friend doesn't need to, or maybe your friend needs to eat every 3 hours, and lunch is like really when they're hungry, and so they eat so much at lunch, and you're not really eating that much. That doesn't make you wrong
or bad
or them wrong or anything. It's, I'm doing what works for me.
Yep.
And you're leaving that space for them to do what works for them.
Right.
And, you know, giving yourself grace as a parent in that same way.
Yeah.
I think it's always harder for us to do for ourselves. You know, we'll do it for our kids.
Right.
But we're modeling it too.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I think, okay, I really I mean, this is so I mean, I know you talked about your kids being on the move and everything, but I really like the real life solutions, these, go-to snack ideas, in the sense of, if you're really struggling, start here.
Okay.
Just like a snack to just start implement something small that feels super doable.
Okay. So across the board, we talked about it. Protein, so important. So almost more than anything, I want you to start thinking as a parent, as an ADHD or yourself, whatever, protein first. I need to have a protein food. So what foods have protein?
Right.
Meats, nuts, peanut butter, eggs, milk, yogurt, cottage cheese, protein bars, protein shakes, all those types of things. So that's what we're thinking first. That's what we want to teach our kids, like protein first. Protein's going to help keep them full, more satisfied. Unfortunately, what it's missing is that part that's super satisfactory, right? Like it's not the carby, snacky, salty, crunchy thing. So that's where you put those foods in with it.
Right.
But because of that protein being present, they're going to be more full, more satisfied,
Right.
more energetic, not have these highs, not have these lows. So keeping those types of foods on hand. For a parent that has ADHD, I'm not saying like you have to go out and buy like the things of yogurt, because that means you're going to have to now get a bowl out. You got to get a spoon out. Obviously, you can teach your kids to do that. But even if it's just the mini things of yogurt, just buy those. Those are simple, easy. The mini things of peanut butter, have those on hand. They have those like snack packs with like the nuts, the cheese, the
pretzels.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like sometimes they have
like fruit.
graham cracker.
If there's like
things.
Yep.
So stuff like that. Jerky is a great protein option. Some kids like that, some certainly don't. Having things like hard-boiled eggs on hand, you can buy those already made, which are super simple, easy to have on hand. I understand, like, hard-boiled eggs aren't that hard to make, but I'll tell you what, every single time I have to make them, I look it up. How do I make these? Because I never remember.
Right.
What temperature is the water supposed to be?
Yeah,
Is it supposed to be cold? It's supposed to be hot? When am I putting the lid on? When am I turning the heat off? I never know.
Which might be that extra step that keeps people away from it.
Yeah. Just get the ones that are already made.
Right.
Very, very simple, easy. Like I said, if you're looking at something like a granola bar type food item that's nice and balanced, honestly, it has the carb. Just find one that has protein with it too.
Right.
And there are a lot of really great options for those.
And we've noticed with our kids, there's different textures of the protein bars that they like, that they lean towards. They, of course, they're both different. So we just get different kinds for them that one's a little more chewy for the one who likes that. One's a little crunchier. You know what I mean?
Yep. So those are great always to have on hand. I love protein shakes. I get the ready-made protein shakes. Nothing, it's beautiful to, get your blender out and get your fruit and all the, stuff and put that in. That's great. But also they have some really great ready-made protein shakes to have on hand. And it doesn't mean the child or you yourself have to drink the whole thing. Like you could pair that up with a crunchy snack or some fruit or some veggies and hummus. And that's a really well-balanced snack for them.
Right.
So just going back to kind of having those quick, easy, grab and go options is really, really important. I think that those are important. And what's really nice is I think because there's so much, we'll say press around protein, there are a lot of options and you can get them pretty quickly at a lot of places, right? Even like gas stations have some
I think once you become aware that this is what you need, you'll start to see when you go grocery shopping, all the different options. Because I remember first jumping into, okay, how are we going to get him to fuel his brain, when Wyatt was first having, the eating issues. And he quickly moved through it because we did the research and because, did you know they had, this option at the grocery store? We didn't even know they did that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So just paying attention to those things. And something else that we recently figured out, my husband always did this when Wyatt was little or two, bedtime banana. Wyatt would always ask for a banana at bedtime. And it was like his snack. And Jeremy would go, oh, totally. Yeah, of course you can have a bedtime banana. It's like, this is awesome. He wants a banana before bed. And then we're reading into it and there's, some magnesium in the banana that helps them sleep. And ADHDers have sleep issues. So bedtime banana is epic.
Yes.
So if your kid wants that extra snack after their snack, a bedtime banana, it's a cute name too.
I love it.
But we can do that too.
Yep.
As the parents. A bedtime banana, oh, maybe it'll help you sleep. Like, what if you just tried it for a week and it worked, right?
Yep.
It's just something, give it a whirl.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is adorable.
Isn't it cute? When he found that, he was like, he was already doing that.
Yeah.
This is awesome. He would just, oh, can I have a banana right now? Is that like a weird request? No, there's no weird requests.
Right.
There's a reason you're leaning there, bud, you know?
Yep.
Just has to be able to ask, you know?
Yep.
I love that. Okay. So, to wrap up, we're going to have Erin back and like showing us some stuff.
Yeah.
Like, just maybe preparing stuff or something. Oh man, I know you've done that and that is your jam and I would love to feature it because I am not. And you could teach me some things. Yeah. I'm fine with not being perfect and messing up royally, simple. Right?
We just do little ingredients.
I know.
Not big, long lists with expensive things that we can never find
in
the store. Right. Or you will use again.
Yeah, we'll have to do that. Okay. So we'll have to bring you back. If there's one thing you could say as we wrap up to an overwhelmed ADHD parent about food, what would it be?
Well, I feel like I've kind of mentioned it a couple times already. But I think it's because it's so like near and dear to my heart because like we said, there is an overwhelming amount of misinformation around nutrition. Alarming amount of people giving nutrition information that have no business giving information. And so I think if we just go back to the basics of really just solid nutrition, right? Fruits, vegetables, add protein to every time that you or your child eats. Focus on whole grains, healthy fats, like we mentioned, salmon, nuts, seeds, peanut butter, all those things. Whole grains when they have them. So things like whole wheat bread. Not all the time. Doesn't have to be all the time, but just small amounts. Kind of look at kind of what you're doing now. See where some of those holes are. See where what you're missing on. Like I said, if it's, you know what, I'm not drinking enough water. Okay, if you're drinking 5 cups right now, let's see if we can go to 6, 7. If you're having 3 cups of fruit and vegetables a day, let's just see if you can add one more serving
just
somewhere.
Do one step at a time.
Yes. If you said, you know what, Erin, I think I hear you. I hear what you're saying. Protein's super important for the ADHD brain. I'm going to focus on just trying to like teach my kids and myself what foods have protein and how can I make sure that I'm having that at every meal and snack, no matter what. How can I do that? Yeah. What could I get at the grocery store that's going to make that really easy for me? Right. So I think just going back to the basics of good, solid nutrition practices. Yeah. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be 100% of the time. Right. It doesn't have to not include convenience items like already cooked chicken that's now chopped up and frozen. Mm-hmm. Or it doesn't have to be just fresh vegetables. If canned works for you, canned is lovely. Right. Use canned. Right. That's great. So try to get out of your own way and just go back to the basics. Kind of, like I said too, look at what you're already doing and see how you can build on that. Right.
It's all about understanding what works for you, what works for your family, and just being realistic about it. Yeah. Like, I love that. Getting back to the basics and really honing in on what works for you. Yeah. So I want to close with, we're going to put all of Erin's information in the show notes so you can find her and, reach out to her as well if you want to hire her for her services. And I think one of the things I want to end with is the goal is never perfection when it comes to ADHD, when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to anything that we're dealing with in life. So make steps forward, put in a little progress, have self-compassion, be curious with your kid, and just know that one thing at a time, one step at a time will move us forward and we'll figure something out. Yeah. It doesn't always mean we might not take a step back. Right. But keep going. Yep. And keep working with that. So if this episode hit home for you, subscribe, share it with someone who gets it, leave a quick review. I want to thank Erin for being here. We're definitely going to have her back. And maybe do a little meal prep action. Maybe she'll do a demonstration. So yes, definitely look up her information. Everything will be in the show notes. You don't have to do this alone. You're not the problem. Till next time.